Great. Hey, everyone. Thank you for joining this week's community SIP call. We're covering quite a few things today, along with the SIP activity updates. We're also going to spend a bit of time talking about the 2.1 upgrade. And we've got some folks in the community here to join in that discussion because I'm sure there are a few questions. So the best way we thought to tackle all of that would be to start off with a Q&A. So we've got Jesse and Jude here who can speak a little bit to just the basics of the upgrade, who will need to make changes as part of the upgrade, and what it means for users of Stacks once the upgrade gets activated. So we'll cover all of that during the Q&A, and we'll also have time for discussion afterward. We've also got a special presentation from Mike on the ecosystem DAO. So stay tuned. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Hiro to kick off our meeting.
Hi, everyone. Hi, thanks for coming to the SIP Weekly Call. So yeah, I see people in the audience. I think most people know what this meeting is about, so I'll just go over quickly in case anybody comes in. So yeah, this meeting is about updating the community, whether you're a dev or someone new from the community just into Stacks. We'll give you an overall update, and here you can share your proposal, and here you can perhaps find people to collab with. So you want to gauge an idea of the stuff you're working on. Yeah, so here is a forum to do that. But yeah, mostly we want to give people regular updates. So yeah, so probably the most top level at later stage updates of the SIPs that are already in the pipeline. So SIP 13, 16, 18, 19. And SIP 13, it's at the stage where it's being accepted. And I think SIP 16, 18, 19 all been moved to activation in progress. And there are some earlier ideas like the standardization of Bitcoin derivation path that's currently in discussion. That's before the draft, and the minor centralization is also an important topic that's before the draft. So yeah, just to give people some awareness of where things are. And some are in draft stage. So one of the one I thought might be quite interesting was the Taproot payment. I think that one, correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, that one will help reduce the cost for miners on the Bitcoin side, because they can batch things together. So it will help the profitability. Yeah, so that's one. And some things in early stage, like we touched on, that I think is critical, and there's been more discussion today, is the miner centralization. I think Ryan proposed something lately. And also, I think Munib suggested to run some simulation. So yeah, I think anybody who is not on that thread, yeah, please jump in. And I know most of you are, but yeah, I think it almost feels like we're coming to some sort of consensus slowly, almost there. So yeah, so I think it would be great to see all the key people coming to some sort of agreement, and we can move that to proposal or draft SIP. But yeah, I thought one other interesting one that came up was the Bitcoin address path, the derivation path, because we noticed that Gamma and Xverse currently have the slightly different addresses. So yeah, I think that one's also probably quite interesting to jump in as well. Yeah, so just that's the quick update on the SIP related stuff, but we'll go over to Stacks 2.1. So yeah, I think most of you here know what they are. Yeah, so please stop me if I'm wrong, but I'll give some of the most impactful ones, perhaps, or interesting ones. So the continuous stacking. If you stack it, currently there's like cooldown and in between cycle, like you have to wait for like 2 weeks. That's like a lot of like potential money you're not earning, and it's not utilizing enough. You're missing if you do short cycles.
All right, Hiro, can you just clarify, just rewind a little bit? So what is the Stacks 2.1 upgrade, and are all these things that you've listed things that we can expect as part of the upgrade?
Yes, so yeah, sorry. So Stacks 2.1 upgrade, last year we had network upgrade. So essentially these are network upgrades to improve different performances of stacks. And 2.1 upgrade has a bundle of different improvements bundled into one. And last year we had 2.05 upgrade last November that we voted on and got approved and got activated, ratified. And now this year, the core devs been working super hard. And I think this has been in the work for like 18 months. If I hope I'm right. So it's got a lot of things packed into this. So yeah, I hope that explains it. Is that right?
Yep. Thanks.
Yeah. So some of the key stuff that we want to hit, like continuous stacking, to really give to utilize the POX function, so you don't have to wait and you can earn more stacks, earn more Bitcoin. So clarity, I'll pick another one. Clarity, I think one of the stuff was the POX reward information. I think that one will expose more information to the devs, and the devs can write things on top of it, like other financial derivatives. So I think that's quite good one that you can build, other people can build on top of that. And I think that another one that's quite interesting is like a sunset vote to extend the reward. So essentially, like the reward will come to a stop at some point, but there's no way to extend that POX reward right now. So I think this one will be great. You know, if people want the miners to continue receive the incentives to continue mine, it's not like they won't mine just because it runs out, but that incentives keeps people keep mining. I think it helps secure the network. So yeah, that one enables that extension of the subsidy, the sunset period. And the last one, I think that's super practical and we're seeing happening now, and it's definitely needed, is flash blocks to improve the reliability of the blockchain. Because if you're aware, I think most of you are, and some people new to stacks or Bitcoin might not, but there's a lot of blocks that comes one after another, like sometimes within a minute on the Bitcoin side, and the stacks block cannot jump into the Bitcoin that quickly because it takes time to get things, put the blocks together and stuff. So stacks end up missing that quick flash block of so it's one block that's not used, and we don't. So I think this one is a super practical one, and we're seeing that every day. Because yeah, if I tune into the mempool, sometimes I see flash blocks like on a weekly basis. So yeah, this one is super practical. So yeah. I don't know if Jude anybody else got comment about that. Jude, do you want to add anything?
Sure, just a couple of clarifications. The POX sunset's actually going away. Instead of voting to extend it, the system would permit people who hold stacks to vote to disable it in case miners start to do something, bad in the process of POX existing. Like maybe they stack and they claim too many Bitcoin rewards and discount mine too much. Stacks holders can throw such miners off. on a case-by-case basis. Reason we are proposing this change as opposed to just voting to extend the sunset is because two reasons. We don't want to force users to have to keep re-voting to extend it. I think people generally want POX to stay. And two, miners want the system to work long-term, or at least they currently want the system to work long-term because it's how they make their money. So the risk of miners doing something evil with POX stacking is probably small in practice, but it's non-zero. So making it so we have people in the loop so that, if miners do evil things, the users can just stop miners from doing the evil things on a case-by-case basis is a safer bet, we thought, than trying to make it so that we just try to pick the magic date at which POX has to stop forever. The other thing to clarify is the better tolerance of flash blocks applies mainly to the prepare phase. Right now, POX activates only if 80 of the 100 blocks in the prepare phase A, get mined, and B, confirm the same stacks block. The difficulty with flash blocks is that prevents, or it hinders the network's ability to reach that 80% threshold. So what the better tolerance of flash blocks applies to is making it so that, the first 10 flash blocks in the prepare phase don't count towards that threshold, thereby de-risking the possibility that POX does not activate in the next reward cycle. Dealing with flash blocks in general, that doesn't need a 2.1 upgrade. That can happen now. Like every release gets slightly better at dealing with flash blocks because we find more and more corner cases in which flash blocks become a problem. But changing the prepare phase criteria, that does require a breaking change.
Okay, thanks for clarification, Jude. I think before we go into any of this in more detail, we can start with the Q&A to answer some more basic questions. And Hero actually has links to places that folks can read about the upgrade in more detail. So if you're curious and you want to learn more, especially about the things that Jude is talking about, here are some places you can go. We'll share it in the chat as well. But for now, why don't we go into Q&A? So we've come up with a few questions that I think are just commonly asked questions about the upgrade. You can find answers to these on GitHub and in the blog post about 2.1 as well, but we can answer them here. And then if there are any other questions that come up from the community, then we have some time for open discussion afterward. But why don't we just start with why there is an upgrade and what it means for stacks? And I assume either Jesse or Jude will take any of these questions.
We both unmuted at the exact same time.
Yeah, I guess so.
So why is there an upgrade? Well, blockchains. So like any piece of software, blockchain, it will be the case that users' expectations of how the software works will evolve over time. And sometimes they'll evolve in ways that the blockchain is unable to meet without making a breaking change. I know that in some blockchain circles, breaking changes of all forms are anathema. In other circles, they are celebrated and done very often. Because stacks is very closely tied to the Bitcoin ethos in this capacity, the stance that the SIP process currently takes, and I say currently because ultimately I believe software needs to serve the needs of its users, and the users ultimately get to decide how that happens. The stance it currently takes is breaking changes can happen on a cadence, even like maybe once every 6 months, once every year, whatever that cadence happens to be, as long as the users vote to acquiesce to it. Like there has to be a measurable, falsifiable consensus that yes, we do want the breaking change. It can't just be something the developers just throw out there and say, okay, guys, have fun. That does not, I don't know. That sounds very risky, and that approach sounds very inconsiderate of user needs. So why is there an upgrade? Well, there's a bunch of things that stacks could be doing that meet the needs that users have expressed through various channels, such as through the forum, through Twitter, through meetings, through conferences. But the system is currently unable to do. And so the 2.1 upgrade is meant to address a whole slew of those types of breaking changes in one breaking change, like one big breaking change that includes a basket of a bunch of smaller changes that are all individually breaking changes. So what does that mean for stacks? The TLDR is y'all got to upgrade by the time the network goes live. Maybe Jay Wiley can speak a bit more to what that means if you're on a node or if you're a participant in the ecosystem and interested in running nodes.
Sure. Very simply, everyone has to sync from Genesis. So anyone that runs a node will have to start a new node or turn their existing node off and sync from the Genesis block to the tip height.
It only takes a couple days, so it shouldn't.
Yeah.
And you'll know the time. You'll know the time at which it has to happen when it needs to happen. So you'll
yes,
have.
we will put a lot of communication when it has to happen. So hopefully everyone is prepared.
Yeah.
But if you have your old node running, it won't stop working, but it will, it won't be usable.
That's right. And 2.1 nodes will be compatible with 2.05 up until the activation height. So you can start your 2.1 nodes sooner than when the network goes live. You don't have to like time it perfectly or anything like that. When we did SIP 12, which is how 2.05 came to be, I think there was like a 6-week lead time or something like that between when the code was ready and when 2.05 activated. So plenty of time to get a new node instantiated and stood up.
Will we get a dry run on testnet? I assume it'll be rolled out.
Probably lots of dry runs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe that's
right.
a question.
Oh, sorry, Jude. What was that?
Maybe that's a good segue as to when this is going to happen.
Yeah, a fun question to ask.
So the business aligned correct answer is sometime this year, probably closer to Q4. But the real answer is when it's ready. Because blockchains represent the code and the logic needed to represent and allow users to manage a lot of valuable assets, it is more important, I believe, that we get the upgrade right the first time, even if it means delaying it, if need be, than to just try to rush it out the door and have it break. Because, if your blockchain breaks or chain splits, that leads to a whole bunch of problems with people having confidence in the network. It leads to potential loss of funds and a whole bunch of other ugliness that we would way prefer to avoid altogether, if at all possible. So when will it happen? Probably Q4 sometime is the thing we're hoping for, subject to nothing show-stoppingly bad discovered during the dry runs that we do on testnet.
Okay, great, Jude. And is there a simple and straightforward way to answer what is left to do before the upgrade is activated? So I think by that, the question is referring to things like a vote. Is there anything else that's part of the decision-making process?
Yeah, sure. So if you actually want to go to the previous slide, I think Hero had a link to the project management board for Stacks 2.1. Everything in that board has to get moved to the done category as a bare minimum prerequisite before you can start spinning up a Stacks node that has the 2.1 logic. So once all of the code is done, or sometime towards when we know what the light at the end of the tunnel will look like, the people working on the code, so in this case, it's engineers at Hero, the foundation, and potentially others, will release collectively a SIP that describes what goes into the upgrade, as well as in that SIP an activation section that describes how users can vote to proceed to launch the system. So ultimately, when the network will go live, when the users decide it will go live, according to that activation section. And that activation section will be very similar to that in SIP 12. So just like how in SIP 12, you can use your Stacks private key to send a Bitcoin transaction on the Bitcoin chain to either a yes address or a no address with a minimal amount of dust attached to it. So similarly, we will do that with 2.1. So if there's enough user support, and if a big enough fraction of the users who vote yes, then the system will go live. Once that vote has closed, that tells us what block height at which the system will go. And once that block height is chosen, we will make we will merge what is in the next branch into the main branch, and that will be and it will have that block height hardwired in. So that's the key. That's the key at that point to go and, if you haven't done so already, download and install the node and have it boot up. And then once that Bitcoin block height that everyone voted on arrives, that's when the new features turn on.
I've also shared the links for the project and the discussions in the chat.
Awesome.
Thanks, Jesse.
Who's doing the majority of the work, Jude, on actually making this happen?
Oh, it's a team effort. If you look at the Git commit log, there's a lot of work from myself, from Aaron, from Greg, from Pravithra. There might even be some PRs from other community members. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it's very much a cross-organization effort.
Thanks, Hero.
Is there anything specific people can do on testnet to help?
When we have the release candidate up and running, if you want to spin up a 2.1 node and see if it breaks and report back to us debug logs from when it breaks, that would be super useful.
Yeah. Okay.
Question from Tadia. For Jude, please explain what makes the changes to Clarity a breaking change and how the system can handle incompatible versions of Clarity contracts.
Okay, so what's happening in the Clarity VM is there's multiple language definitions now, and the language that, when the parser and when the interpreter, the lexer, the parser, when they all run to evaluate the Clarity code, they will know from the transaction being executed which version of the Clarity language to use to evaluate it. So what that means is if you're using a feature that's in 2.1, you'll be using Clarity version 2. And the interpreter will recognize Clarity version 2 keywords, but the Clarity version 1 interpreter will not. So what that means then is if you try to use a Clarity version 2 keyword in a Clarity version 1 contract, the contract either won't parse and thus the transaction won't ever be mined, or you'll get a runtime error if you somehow manage to get past the check errors that would tell you that, hey, this is an unknown function, unknown keyword, nothing's going to happen. So what that also means, so one change that is coming in 2.1 that's a bit subtle, and it's not on this list here, but it's just necessary to make this work, is that when you send a smart contract transaction to deploy a contract, you now have the option to choose which version of the language will be used when executing that contract. That will allow you to keep using Clarity 1 if you like. You can also use Clarity 2. That will be the case going forward with future versions of the Clarity language. If you do not specify a version, then whatever the default version for the current Stacks node version is will be used. So if you don't specify a version in 2.1, you'll use Clarity 2 by default. When you send a contract call transaction to invoke another contract, the version of Clarity that gets executed is also, again, the version of the contract itself, not the contract call. There's actually a pretty interesting discussion thread on GitHub just about this very issue. How do we know what version of Clarity to be using? Let me see if I can pull that up right here because I just sent the PR that closes it out. 1 second here. Yeah, it's, I believe it is 3131. Yeah, let me just post it here in the chat. And then the associated PR is, yeah, right here. That PR's description describes the specific rules for determining which version of the Clarity language will be used. Sorry, the other question here was what makes the changes to Clarity a breaking change? That was kind of hinted at earlier, every time you have new Clarity keywords, it's automatically a breaking change because the current interpreter doesn't know what to do with them, but the new interpreter does. So what concrete changes to the Clarity language will result in a breaking new version of the language? So concretely, we have a whole bunch of new keywords that got added to the language and some new built-in variables. My favorites, I think, are principal parse and principal destruct and principal construct, which allow you to convert the principal type to and from its constituent byte buffers. That in turn will let you build a principal type out of data posted from an Oracle or some sort of off-chain source. My other favorite new features are the buffer to and from integer conversion code. I notice when I'm just reading through other people's smart contracts on the chain that my code that converts the 16 bytes into a uint ends up being copied and pasted in a lot of places. I'm flattered, but we can do better. That should really just have been a built-in this whole time. We just didn't get to it in time when 2.0 got released. So there are now keywords in Clarity that do that, do the conversion between buffers, strings, and integers. There's a few others as well that are maybe more obscure, but useful in highly specific cases. Like I know that SIP 18, for example, proposed a breaking change called to consensus buff and from consensus buff, where you can convert a serialized clarity value, its canonical serialized representation, to and from the type, a variable with that type itself. So that way you can post like a signed serialized clarity value to the chain and have your contract convert that into a clarity value without having you, without requiring you to have to go and parse that yourself.
All right, thanks, Jude. Okay, we have quite a few questions, so again, just to be mindful of time, let's just roll through these. And of course, if the audience has questions, feel free to continue putting them in the chat. But we can get through these simpler, straightforward questions first. So, what's different in the new POX contract? I think that you've sort of been talking about it, but if you'd want to sum that up, Jude or Jesse.
The main changes are you can now stack continuously, and you can also re-up your stacking. So if you are currently stacking and you get more stacks tokens, you can bump your current stacking pool with it.
Awesome.
Drew probably knows a lot more about it, but those are the most compelling features, I think, for a lot of people.
Okay. Well, actually, that leads into the next couple of questions. So what happens to any lock tokens when 2.1 is activated? And will I or anyone need to restack their tokens?
Yes, you will. So when 2.1 launches, there's a window of time between when it launches and when the new POX contract takes effect. So the new POX contract takes effect after 2.1 launches. The reason for this is that the POX contract can only really take effect at the start of the reward cycle, because that's how you calculate the reward set for the next 17 days or however long it runs for. So during that period of time between 2.1 launching and POX-2 being the new POX contract taking place, whatever tokens were locked in POX will become spendable again. You can relock them, you can spend them, you can do what you want with them. But when you call stacks, when you call stacks again, it will only work if you call it on the POX2 contract. So you'll be restacking your tokens into the POX2 contract, so that when the POX2 contract activates, then that's how your reward address will be selected, by looking at that contract instead of the original POX contract.
Cool. Hero, would you mind going to the next slide? Okay, and you both have talked about this too, but folks will developers need to update their code for this new version. And who else will need to update? For example, those running their own nodes, exchanges, etc.
Well, you can't change your smart contracts after you deploy them. So you could certainly make a new version of your smart contract that uses the new clarity keywords. That's certainly allowed. I believe Stacks.js and other similar things like MicroStacks.js will be updated in time for the 2.1 upgrade to happen. So if you're doing API calls through those libraries, the change should just be transparent.
Yes, I've also reached out to the maintainer of MicroStacks, so he's aware that this is coming soon.
Yep.
I know Hero will be on top of Stacks.js.
Who else will need to upgrade? If you run a node, you're going to have to upgrade. That applies to exchanges. It applies to users. It's just like 2.05 all over again, except with the extra constraint that you will have to boot from Genesis, because there's a lot of backwards incompatible changes to the chain state layout on disk that are just intractable to build migrations for. Well, I guess that answers the next question too.
Yeah.
Upgrading, no. And if you try to do that, your node will crash and it will tell you to go upgrade from Genesis.
Yep. So this is the sync from Genesis.
Yep.
All right. Okay, and that brings us to our last question. I think we've alluded to a lot of this, but how can the community support this upgrade? I think there are a few different ways that we can do that.
I think
go
ahead.
When the vote is ready, as many people as possible should vote for it or against it.
Yeah, spread the word. That's the biggest thing. Like when the vote's going to happen, by all means, spread the word, get your friends to vote. I wish we could do like an NFT drop to people who voted or something like that. That'd be fun.
Oh, that would be cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the I voted sticker that you get in like US elections, at least.
We could do that.
Yeah, actually, that's a fun little promotion. It's like, you build your street cred in stacks because like, oh yeah, I was there for the 2.1 upgrade like 5 years later.
Great idea.
Yeah, these should be POAPs. We should 100% do POAP NFTs for voting.
Damn, I wish we did this in 2.05. We can retcon that. We can totally give out 2.05 NFTs for the same reason if it's popular.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can actually use this long term for like reputation in the SIP governance process for different committees and things like that. Anyway, no need to get too deep down the rabbit hole on this, but that's something we should definitely look to.
I think somebody from Stacks Advocate, so under Stacks Foundation, Haas is doing something like that, almost like a soulbound kind of NFT. I think he's making some sort of gratitude NFT or token, stuff like that, if I'm correct.
Yeah, I think you're right. I remember seeing him talk about that briefly.
Yeah, definitely exploring it. A lot of these like credentials or verifications for actions that people have taken or work that they've done. So really interesting thing we could explore, and maybe something for you to consider, Mike, as part of the DAO that you'll talk about in a little bit.
Yeah, my brain was just firing then.
Yeah,
sure.
All right. Well, thank you for answering all those questions. Are there any other questions that this discussion has raised? And I saw a question from Juliet. This video will be posted on YouTube and will subsequently be posted on Twitter and other social platforms. Yeah, any other questions on this or anything else related to SIPs?
I'm surprised no one asked about hyperchains for 2.1.
Yeah, well, what can we say about hyperchains now, Jesse?
Oh,
Nothing.
one question that I have about hyperchains is that I haven't seen a SIP for it. And is there a plan to draft a SIP for it?
Oh, yes, there is. They're just so new that we just haven't, the Hero hasn't gotten that far yet.
Okay.
Yeah, when it comes to like technical implementations of things, usually the SIP is one of the later things to happen because people will want to noodle around with the code, get prototypes working, and then they can write the SIP that describes how they work.
This might actually be a good teachable moment about the SIPs process, Jude and Hero. So I think hyperchains, we learned more recently that it was blocked by this 2.1 upgrade, which has obviously made it so that the timeline has been extended. But for any other technical features, innovations that people come up with, it's recommended that you try to do it in a way that doesn't require having to be a part of the next upgrade, right? So because
you're only shooting yourself in the foot if you do that, because upgrades happen when the community votes for them, which could be a long time from when your code is ready to go.
Right, and the goal moving forward is that these votes can happen more frequently, but because of things like bandwidth and just the process that it takes to integrate the code, test it, you're looking at these upgrades happening every 9 months, maybe on average.
For now, we'd like to get it to 6 months, but that's pretty ambitious.
Yeah, 6 months is ambitious considering that it takes a few months to just work on the code itself, and then the time it takes to get people to come out and vote and build that process. So it does take a while. So while this upgrade is really important and it's really exciting, all the features that are going to come with it, for future reference, anyone who's thinking about pushing some big technical features or innovations, trying to do it without needing to upgrade would be great. So just putting that as a PSA out there.
It's also a lot less controversial to do it that way because especially if you can structure the upgrade in a way that not everyone has to upgrade to start benefiting from it. Like if it's a new, I don't know, like RPC API endpoint, no one needs to upgrade besides you at the end of the day. So it's a lot less controversial to get such a PR like that merged in. For something like a soft fork, like I know that one proposal out right now on the forum is like, hey, what if we make a new contract, the quote unquote true BNS contract? What happens to the old one? Well, you could execute a soft fork where miners agree to just not mine any more transactions for the old BNS contract. That's actually easier to do than a breaking change because then you only have to convince a handful of people to upgrade, and then it's no longer really controversial beyond that. Like and if people want to undo it later, they can by becoming their own miners and then negating the soft fork. the most controversial change is by far the breaking changes, because there's no really going back after the breaking change happens. So there's a very high bar to getting something past the SIPS process for a breaking change, because the gravity of the situation is very, very strong, and the stakes are the highest when you do a breaking change to get something happening.
Jude.
Yeah.
With the 2.1 upgrade, thinking back to the large forum discussion about mining, will this make decentralized mining pools possible with the Clarity upgrades?
Yes. So one of the changes that's going through in 2.1, or sorry, I say going through, I mean proposed to go through. I don't believe that I have the right to say that something will happen when I don't have the power to do that. One of the changes proposed to happen is altering the Coinbase transaction wire format so that a miner can choose a different address that will receive the block reward. Right now, if you're a miner, your coins, your new stacks go to whatever address you use to mine that stacks block, for better or for worse. That's problematic for miners for two reasons. First, it means that their hot wallet that's doing the mining also receives their stacks tokens, so they have to periodically clean it out, which is a hassle. And second, that address can only be a standard address. It can't be a contract address. So one of the things that's changing in 2.1 proposal is making it so that the miner can put either a different standard address, like their cold wallet address, for example, to which the block reward will be sent, or a smart contract address, which would facilitate building these centralized mining pools, because now you can build a smart contract that does something like inspects the block commit transaction itself, makes sure that people who pay the Bitcoin that sent that get a pro rata share of the stacks Coinbase, and you can make it all self-service. So the smart contract itself just takes care of allocating the stacks that it accumulates to the people who fund the Bitcoin transactions that mine the blocks. You combine that with making it possible to send Taproot funded block commits, which I believe is already possible right now. That means you could have, potentially thousands of people participating in a mining pool in this manner, where there's no central operator. Like the smart contract itself is the operator.
Excellent, thank you. I know a lot of people will be excited for that one.
I see Igor has a question. What's the right way to standardize the process to onboard new contributing engineers? Yeah, that's a good question for Monday. We do have weekly blockchain meetings every Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern that are public. Anyone is welcome to come. Briefly, like speaking just for myself, if I were trying to onboard onto another blockchain project, my preferred approach is I just read the code. But that's not meant to be dismissive. It's just that in my life experience, I just become very skeptical of onboarding processes in general, because they tend to miss things. So I just read the code, poke things, and see if I can break the system, and just fiddle around with it until I feel like I understand it well enough. But that said, we need to do a better job. That's not an excuse to not do a better job. Floating around on Google Slides, I have a half-finished, like Stacks 2.0 internals slide deck that uses probably the worst graphics ever seen known to man, short of being actual ASCII art, but it does try to explain and illustrate how all the pieces of code work together with all of the pieces of the code base with really badly drawn diagrams. I can share that publicly. It's not complete. It doesn't talk about Clarity, for example. It talks about like the inner parts of how the sortation system works, for example, stuff like that. My hope is that I can get enough cycles maybe after 2.1 launches where I can just finish that out, and then that can become like something like a companion to the Clarity book for people who want to get their hands dirty with how the blockchain actually works.
I don't think anyone here would ever knock ASCII art, Jude.
I'm sorry, what?
I don't think anyone would denigrate ASCII art.
I mean, I definitely am a fan of ASCII art myself in markdown documents such as SIPs, just because it's more accessible, I think, than trying to use an image with alt text. But it's definitely not glamorous or pretty or anything like that. It's just functional.
On the contrary, I think ASCII art is exceptionally beautiful. And on that note, I think, is Jason still on the call? I think Hero had invited Jason on the call to talk a little bit about his experience upgrading. If you still want to, Jason, you don't need to. If there's anything you want to add, as someone who's been impacted by an upgrade before.
Yeah, so just to give a little context on that, we followed a very similar process with city coins and the CCIPs to the SIPs. And obviously, we've been through SIP 2.05 before. So really with these kind of things, it's just making sure that you're keyed into the right communication channels. You know, a lot of that information is out there. We see a lot of things going into the Stacks Discord in particular. If you have like the Core Devs channel is definitely one of the places that I hang out. And also the mailing list. So there's the Stacks announcement mailing list. And Jude, if you want to drop a link to that too, there's one that people can join from. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe it's announce plus subscribe at stacks.org.
Okay.
If not, it's a Google group. So let me see if I can find the Google group link.
Yeah, so that's another thing too. I mean, for anybody who's definitely operating nodes or maintaining any of these similar services, that's one to be a part of, because you'll get all the messages of like upcoming releases, what's been changed, kind of keyed in that way. You can also follow the GitHub notifications. But just to kind of back up and go through my experience, I mean, it's really just if you know ahead of time that the change is coming, you agree with the changes, it's getting it set up and easy to roll over, so you're just ready for it. That being said, I love just seeing how this process is playing out too. I mean, to see how the chain is going to evolve, to keep track of the different discussions that are going on. It's really cool to see it all happening.
Thanks, Jason. So if no one has any other questions or comments about 2.1, shall we move on? Great. Okay. Hero, what do we have next? Okay, so no open discussion. We've got our community presentation from Mike.
Oh, sorry, I didn't unmute my mic. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so generally we have an open floor for people to discuss anything else they have on their mind, SIP related. But today we also invited Mike to talk about his ecosystem DAO stuff. So yeah, Mike, feel free to.
Okay, hi everybody. Yeah, thanks. So I'll just share my screen and just show you what we're building. So this kind of relates to the conversations about voting and how to kind of get more engagement and more people involved in maybe the upgrade or other aspects related to SIPs. So go for the share screen button. Yeah, so we've been, this has come from Marvin and I working together on the Clarity Lab. We've got this Clarity Lab channel where we're discussing all these ideas. If anybody wants to get involved, that's absolutely welcome. And so there's been a kind of idea running, a thread running through our residency over the last couple of months.
I think you're, Mike, I don't think you're sharing the right screen. I think you're sharing Discord. Oh yeah, now you're, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh.
sorry, I was just showing you that there's a Clarity Lab channel where we're talking about this stuff. This is a kind of a very sort of early prototype of what we're kind of thinking about building. So I'm not a designer for sure, and so this is not together with Vue.js. We're recently I've been talking to Jason about maybe learning Svelte and creating a UI for this in Svelte. It might be quite an interesting thing to do in itself. So the idea that we're kind of thinking about is like having a portal where we bring an instance of the executor DAO called ecosystem DAO. So this would be a kind of an actual specific instance of Marvin's reference implementation for the DAO, a bit like what StackDAO have done actually, and bring this together with some pull requests and changes that we're making, additional extensions, and then bring that into an interface. So to enable, for example, part of it would be this area, which would be like what we're thinking is a kind of a portal on the SIPs process in general. I think Juliet asked, where can we get a link to this meeting? So this would be, I think this would be a really good place to host that kind of content. So we've got a consistent interface. You know, putting information about the cabs and maybe calendar integrations and that kind of thing. So there's a kind of central place to go. I was also thinking that we can, so for maybe demystifying the process for people who aren't familiar with GitHub and that level of kind of just looking at GitHub and just being overwhelmed, we can just kind of bring out, for example, we'll build a very lightweight wrapper around the GitHub interface, so everything links back to GitHub. So we can link to every issue, but we can just pull the information out and display it in a kind of more easily digested way for people to be able to kind of see the SIPs that are in progress, the difference between a suggestion and a proposal, which I think is the difference between a GitHub issue and a GitHub pull request. But I think, you know, not many people necessarily know what a pull request is in GitHub. So it's really aimed at community engagement and widening the scope for people to actually get involved and at least be able to see the information. So that's kind of an interface into GitHub. This part of the application would be a kind of a portal with information about the SIPs in general, as I was just saying. So we can, you know, we can pull the I think the process. So
may I add a little bit of anecdotal information there, just a little bit?
Surely. So
I was speaking with someone in DM and I was asking, do you have a GitHub? And the person replied, no, what's a GitHub, mate? So that person doesn't even know what a GitHub is. And he asked me, like, is it like Discord? Like it's a Stacks community member in the NFT world, in NFT space. But yeah, I think that's quite interesting. Like some people just don't even know what GitHub is.
Yeah, I think there's a scope for a kind of a translation of the information, which you know, can be quite overwhelming and difficult to understand. So then the kind of idea is to basically bring this together with the DAO and then enable proposals. So for example, being able to submit a new proposal, which would be basically just a vote on the activation vote, for example. And then, so we're kind of consulting and talking to Matty earlier this week and talking amongst ourselves about what this would look like, how we'd launch this, what would we do to bootstrap it, that kind of thing. But the idea would be everybody would buy in and get some governance tokens, probably through a token sale, you know, at a low cost. And the DAO itself would be completely self-managed, so it wouldn't have any kind of special users within it. I think there's a role for a executive team, an emergency team, to be able to put forward proposals quickly through the DAO at the moment, but that could be locked down as well. So there'd be no kind of privilege status for anybody within the DAO. Yeah, so this is just a snapshot of kind of what we're building. And also the goal is to kind of bring clarity into the interface, because we're giving our residencies. So we're looking for ways to kind of actually bring clarity into the discussion of what's happening with the proposals. So if somebody submits a proposal through here, you know, we should be able to kind of open it and see it and be able to talk about it through this interface, maybe, or link to GitHub.
One pretty, I guess, like a use case that I can see on the near horizon, Mike, is that we've been talking about having a funneling process or like a prioritization process for SIPs. I think Jude mentions this in his scaling up the SIPs process post. And so beyond like the final vote, on ratifying a SIP, there's also the process of prioritizing which SIPs to include in the next upgrade, because we might get, a number of SIPs, a number of proposals, and it might not be as urgent for some compared to others. So using something like this as a way to do like a ranked choice voting sort of thing might be helpful.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that might be a little less like high stakes than the final vote, but an interface like this would be amazing.
Yeah. And that's how I see the project evolving, is through collaboration and suggestion and feedback from community, implementing good ideas like that.
Yeah. And from what I know, what you guys have built is really modular. So you're still sort of weighing your options as far as tokens go. And I know we talked briefly about like a stacking based model of membership. So any ideas like that and any expertise or insights that others can share would really help, I think, the advancement of this for the SIPs process.
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly so modular that you can, I think the extension that we've got at the moment to implement the treasury, for example, so this extension here, it would be voted on the governance token sale. So these two extensions aren't actually part of the core DAO. So we could actually kind of spin up the DAO with, I don't know, a kind of an initial membership, and that initial membership would then vote on whether to enable those extensions. So it would almost be kind of decision making by the DAO about the DAO as it kind of gets underway. Mm. But what we want to do is kind of get it on testnet and see, like we can get people engaging with it there, and then make some decisions collectively about which of these directions to go down. I think, Jenny, that's what we were talking about.
Right. So what's the best way for people to get involved? Is this something that could use a working group, or is this something that could just use some discussion in the Clarity Lab channel? What's the best way for people to get started?
So at the moment, this is on, so anyone can see this. I'm sort of deploying it as I go along on somewhere called testnet.cx.eco. So we're building it openly, and this links back to Discord here. So this comes back to the Clarity Dev channel. There's probably a core team that's kind of emerging with Jason's involved, and Lucas as well is contributing, particularly to the Clarity hero as well, and myself and Marvin at the moment. So yeah, I think through this channel is easiest, probably, Jenny.
Got it. All right, thanks, Mike. Does anyone have any questions for Mike on this?
I just want to say congratulations. I saw the grant was approved, and I'm excited to see this move forward. So that, I think you hit the nail on the head with the word modular, Jenny. That's what's kind of like beautiful about this whole system. So the more the base extensions are set up, the more we identify like which extensions are important and start building those out, the more we have templates for DAOs moving forward, good collaboration, like cross project. I'm excited to see like how this will affect and work with Stacker DAOs is doing, and some of the other projects that have already adopted Executor. Like it kind of brings it all together. So that'll be really fun to see overall. And yeah, Mike's been great leading the charge on this one.
Yeah, agreed. And yeah, even beyond like the votes on the SIPs themselves, this could be, I can see this as a tool that like the consideration advisory boards use, steering committee uses just to vote on decisions they make around reviews. So yeah, tons of use cases down the road.
I think
for
this.
I think
Marvin had a really good suggestion that it can be, it could scale, it could cascade down to other protocol projects, like projects like CityCoins or other projects.
Exactly.
So that's another really interesting kind of direction.
Definitely. Okay. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that with us, Mike, and we'll be sure to engage in the conversation in the Clarity Lab channel. But for now, does anyone have any last minute questions, comments about 2.1 upgrade, any other SIP activity, Mike's presentation, the SIPs process that we can answer in 2 minutes? No? Okay, great. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We're happy to take suggestions for next week's call. The format will be very similar. We'll go over updates from just all the SIP discussions that we've been seeing and follow up on the statuses of the SIPs that are currently in progress. But if there are other issues that anyone wants to discuss, let us know. Let Hiro know. He's your lead point of contact, and we will try to work it into the agenda for these weekly meetings. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good weekend.
Thank you for coming.
Take care.
Thanks all.
Bye.